The November 9th edition of Global Nashville with Karl Dean. I'm Patrick Ryan, president of the Tennessee World Affairs Council. This evening, former Nashville Mayor Karl Dean will talk with Ralph Schulz, president and chief executive officer of the Nashville Area Chamber of Commerce. Mr. Schulz has been a Global Nashville regular, this being his third evening as a guest, and this summer he joined the program as a guest host. Last year, on the first Global Nashville program after the onset of COVID-19, he was asked, how was business in Nashville prior to the pandemic? He said, the business and the economy for this whole region was just exploding in a positive way. We were one of the first cities in the country to come out of the recession, and really for almost about 10 years, we've been seeing a meteoric rise in jobs, a meteoric rise in population. And so just prior to the pandemic, everything looked pretty rosy and with high momentum going forward into the future. This evening, we'll again explore where that future is and more. Ralph Schulz was named president and CEO of the Nashville Area Chamber of Commerce in November 2006, following a 30-year career in nonprofit management, marketing, and fundraising. In taking the position, he accepted a leadership role at one of Middle Tennessee's oldest and largest business federations, an organization dating back to its founding in 1847. Good evening, Mayor Dean, and welcome, Mr. Schulz.
Hi, Patrick.
Pat, thanks. Ralph, thank you. And Ralph, first let me thank you for being a guest host this summer. I feel a little bit like Johnny Carson that, people come in and take over and I, on like endless vacation, but that's good. And I appreciate your help with that.
And I feel like Ed McMahon.
Hey-oh. Let me start off with this. What's your sense of where we are in Nashville, business-wise and otherwise, with COVID? Are you seeing light, or do you think we're out of this, or we still got a ways to go?
Well, I think based on the business activity that we're seeing and based on the economic development activity we're seeing, I would tell you that from an economic development perspective, we are almost back to where we were in February of 2020. We have over 50 prospects in the pipeline. Some of those are expansions, some of those are relocations. The one thing that's a little different from February 2020 is that we're seeing a little more industrial interest in the Middle Tennessee area, and a little, not less, but the proportion of office is below industrial. So in February 2020, we had more office type relocation or expansion going on and less industrial, and now we see more industrial. As far as the rest of it goes, I mean, we're rapidly seeing people returning to workspace and to office areas. The sense is that we're definitely on the downhill slope. I'll just tell you from a chamber perspective, this fall is just like every fall that I've been around before. Economically, we're in a really good place. I just mentioned one thing there. When you measure the restoration of jobs as we pull out of COVID, Nashville is within 10,000 jobs of the previous level in February 2020. That is one of the top 10 in the country for recovery. So it is, we're seeing a rapid return to work, and that's a good thing. Yeah.
Recently, and you can tell us exactly when, but recently the chamber you issued a statement, speaking for the chamber, about pandemic-related mandates and the business community, saying the Nashville Area Chamber supports preserving businesses' ability to maintain their diversity, flexibility, and innovation in dealing with COVID-19. When was the statement issued? Why was it issued? And what issue are you trying to respond to or comment on?
Well, we issued a statement just prior to the beginning of the second special session, which was called to deal specifically with COVID-related issues. And we made that statement because, first of all, we had polled our membership and polled businesses, and we found that 60% of the businesses didn't want any mandate at all. They wanted to be able to manage their business environment as they felt necessary. There are some businesses that really rely on a high level of safety and control from their perspective. They want to protect their employees, they want to protect their customers, and they want to project that to their customer base. And then there are other businesses that don't feel that those mandates apply to their operations or their circumstances. Maybe it might be a manufacturer that has very great separation of employees. So businesses overwhelmingly told us that they didn't want anybody to apply any mandates. And of course, the federal government has issued an OSHA regulation that would compel a certain level of vaccination and so forth. And we knew that the state legislature was going to feel the need to respond to that. And we made our statement in hopes that businesses wouldn't be put in a position where they had to make a judgment with regards to a federal requirement and a state requirement that might be in conflict. It's that kind of uncertainty and that kind of exposure that businesses just really struggle with. So we were among the many business organizations that were at the special session to encourage the legislature not to establish any kind of mandate legislation.
So do you feel, I mean, does business feel, whether in Nashville or nationwide, that you're kind of caught between a rock and a hard place? You have the federal government saying, you know, test, take back, you know, everybody needs to be vaccinated. And then the state government through the legislature is sort of taking the position, don't tell anybody what to do, and, you know, don't mandate a lot of safety things. Do you feel like you're just caught between two different levels of government telling you what to do and their conflicting messages?
Yeah, I think it creates ambiguity, and businesses like to be able to predict, push forward with certainty, know the rules, honor the rules, and move on. And when you've got two different sets of rules and you're trying to make a choice, you're just in an awkward position. The ambiguity just can potentially freeze a business, and businesses want to recover fast, especially small business. You know, there are a lot of different environments, a lot of different small business variables that, you know, that non-identical policy creates a real question for those businesses, and they don't have the resources to necessarily define that ambiguity. So yeah, it's awkward. I mean, we saw what was happening in Texas before. We saw the position that businesses were in at that point. We understand that state legislature wants to protect the individual right and freedom to make that choice. But from a business perspective, businesses, we felt, should be free to make those choices as they needed to.
So how do you feel the session went?
Well, I think that the legislature made a lot of adjustments to the original bill and the original material that was helpful to relieving some of the ambiguity, particularly as it related to things like federal contracts and, you know, adherence to the federal law when it would have placed the business in great jeopardy. But, you know, we heard from our businesses that they would like to have seen nothing happen. They would have liked to see the full ability to make that determination on their own. So, you know, there again, Karl, there's still undefined space. The issue of private action and the ability to bring private action against a business just creates risk and ambiguity that a lot of businesses would like to avoid.
Yeah, I mean, it seems at this particular junction in history that you have business getting it from both sides. You've got Democrats one way, Republicans the other way, but all telling you what to do.
Yeah. And you know how business is. They like to be able to drive their business as they see fit. It's one of the reasons that Tennessee is such an attractive location for businesses. There's the geography, but it's a business-friendly environment where they have a lot of independence to operate as they need to. And, you know, there were some businesses, a lot of businesses, 60% of our businesses were concerned that that was going to restrict their ability to operate independently.
Okay, can you tell our viewers what is Partnership 2030? And you know, of course, the history of that, it goes back for quite a while, and there's Partnership 2020, 2015, so on and so forth. But just explain what it is and what do you hope to accomplish with Partnership 2030?
Well, in 1989, Wall Street Journal wrote an article that said the cities of the South are on the rise and Nashville's being left behind. And so the business community didn't feel that that was acceptable, and they got together and they said, what we're missing is a plan. So in the early 1990s, they undertook the first 5-year plan for economic development of the region, which was largely Davidson County at that point in time. And that coincided with the election of Phil Bredesen, who was very focused on creating the civic furniture that would cause downtown Nashville to be an epicenter of economic vitality. So when that public-private partnership occurred, great success was realized, beginning really about the year 2000. And then, of course, you know, in your term as mayor, there was just an explosion of that economic development. But every 5 years since 1990, a new plan has been created. And if you track back on the things that have caused Nashville to have this vitality, you'll see a direct correlation between the plans and what was undertaken. So Partnership 2030 is the 7th iteration of 5-year plans. And what we know about the future is that at the end of this 5 years, we will likely have grown 224,000 jobs in this region. Compare that to 530,000 jobs in the first 30 years of partnership, and half of that number will be achieved in the next 5 years. We expect the GDP to continue to grow at double the rate of the national GDP rate. We expect the population of the region to go up probably 200,000 people at the same time. The essence of all of that is that that just expands opportunity for everyone in this region. So as we look at the critical elements that need to be worked on and the critical elements that help us continue to expand that opportunity, we see managing growth is a big issue. So things like infrastructure, education, affordable housing, childcare, all of those things are critical to maintaining a quality of life in this area. And when we have a good quality of life, we have a strong workforce. And when we have a strong workforce, job creators want to put their jobs here. So there's a real focus on talent development and workforce development in the next 5 years. And I think longer, Carl. The birth rate is low and therefore doesn't provide people or future workforce that even replaces the retirement of the boomer generation. And so it is really important to maintain a quality of life that is a magnet that retains and draws skilled people to the area. One last thing, we've done some studies over the last 5 years, and we find that there are people in the community, the regional community, that have ambition and have ability that doesn't necessarily, their skills don't necessarily match the jobs that are being created. So over the next 5 years, you're going to see a real emphasis on creating opportunity for that population because they're here, they're going to stay here. And if they can be equipped to benefit from this future economy, then everybody wins. You can call it economic inclusion, you can call it deep prosperity as we do, but that's going to be a real focal point for the next 5 to 10 years.
What do you see as the future of downtown in terms of coming out of COVID? People have obviously left the office, gone home to work. People are coming back, but at different paces and around the country and different parts of the world. And our downtown seems to be, I think, expanding. That people are, the core of downtown that probably you and I would talk about, and around 2008 or 9 is different than what it is now. I mean, it's an expanded area. Do you see downtown workers all returning, and that the old traditional offices continue, and that downtown expands out further from the historical core?
Yeah, anybody that's come south on I-65 past Trinity Lane headed toward downtown can clearly see a skyline that has expanded from the river to Midtown. It is a sea change from what it used to be. When we talk to businesses about remote work and their remote work policies, we're finding that a lot of businesses are encouraging a full return to the workspace, but even those that are building remote work into their plans are building it in sort of a partial way. That is, workers will still be coming into office space. As far as economic development goes, downtown's still ahead. I mean, it continues to be an epicenter of businesses that want to locate in the center of the region. It gives them kind of a radius of exposure to workforce throughout. So, honestly, I felt that things like transportation access would be somewhat of an inhibitor to downtown development, but that hasn't materialized. There continues to be a lot of interest in downtown development. I think one of the things we have to manage better, though, is that balance of live, work, and play. There's no question that tourism is booming in the downtown area. We've seen some outward migration of businesses from the vicinity of Broadway for a variety of reasons, many of which are related to access, noise, various other factors. And so it's going to be important to preserve in downtown that balance that fits residents, fits businesses, and fits visitors, all in the appropriate measure. And right now, there's a need to impact that balance so that people who live there and people who work there are comfortable being in that space as well.
Right. The president recently signed a bill, the big infrastructure bill, providing a lot of funding for infrastructure. What's your thought about particularly that bill? What is the chamber's position on infrastructure? And what's your thought about the infrastructure needs for Nashville to remain economically viable?
Well, I know that you know the infrastructure needs of this city deeply. There's a need for infrastructure work across the board, whether it's water, sewer, whether it's transportation. There's no question that if we're going to keep pace and make this keep this a place that is a desirable place to be, attention needs to be given to infrastructure. Now, as we look at the infrastructure bill, we're hopeful that there is an opportunity for aggressive pursuit of mobility features or mobility possibilities. Since the the referendum in 2018, many organizations around the community have continued to explore what might fulfill the mobility needs of Nashville. And we're hopeful that this federal bill, that there is an opportunity for us to receive a chunk of that investment that helps us get started on building that mobility infrastructure. Without dedicated funding, it's going to be a challenge. I mean, every locality is going to be expected to invest from their funds into an infrastructure solution, but perhaps with the federal money, we'll see more opportunity to establish that transportation infrastructure. And look, it's a big deal. You know, the connection of people to jobs. You can't talk about affordable housing without talking about mobility infrastructure too. It's just part of the solution. So as jobs are created and people want access to those jobs and employers want access to employees, mobility is a big deal. And especially with people who have an income issue in their household, it can be an important part of the solution.
One of the things, you've been a big supporter of the World Affairs Council and involvement with world affairs as a city. The Japanese ambassador was recently here and spoke to an event sponsored by the World Affairs Council and others, including the Chamber. What's the importance of hosting folks like the ambassador from Japan here in Nashville?
Well, hosting the ambassador of Japan in Nashville, and applause to the World Affairs Council for creating that opportunity. But having the Japanese ambassador to visit Nashville just validates again the global nature of Nashville's economy. When an ambassador who is part of the global enterprise of diplomacy visits Nashville, it both signals the importance of Nashville on the global stage, but it also creates an opportunity for that ambassador, Japanese or not, to promote what they see in Nashville as well. So the World Affairs Council bringing the Japanese ambassador to Nashville, we were happy to be a sponsor of that trip. But for the World Affairs Council to bring a Japanese ambassador to town, it just creates a global economic presence for Nashville that can't be created in any other way.
How would you characterize what foreign direct investment means to Nashville in this region? How important is that for something for the chamber and for the city to focus on?
Well, look, if you go all the way back to the 1970s and the 1980s, when Nissan chose this area to create an automotive plant, you can see that puts our region on an entirely different list. Japan is the number one foreign direct investor in the state of Tennessee, and the state of Tennessee is the number one foreign direct investment site for Japan in this country. So when that happens, it makes people aware that we have a great geographic location, we have a great business-friendly atmosphere, we have a quality of life that employees and employers like to be a part of. And when you have that foreign direct investment here, it draws attention again on a global basis. So whether it's Canada, Mexico, France, the UK, people are aware when they see that foreign direct investment that something's up down in Tennessee, and Tennessee is a great place to make an investment.
Let me ask you about the river. I think during COVID, there has certainly been a lot of activity along the Cumberland River, some big news with Oracle and others. Your thoughts about where we're going to be in terms of riverside development, east side, West Side, whatever, in the next couple of years?
You know, again, I feel like we're having a conversation when you were the mayor and the importance of the river as a binding influence in the community. As Nashville now has begun to expand even further, and the density and the intensity of Nashville continues to take hold, the river is becoming more and more seen as a center feature of the city, both recreationally and from a development perspective. So as we see developers that are beginning to plot development along the riverfront from really West Nashville all the way to Opryland on the east side, they are thinking about their developments as providing public access to the river. They're going to improve that public access to the river, and it's going to create a great living environment, but it's also going to create a great recreational environment. And a lot of that development of the recreational space will be undertaken by those developers. So I think you're going to see the river really open up as a resource, and the access to the river really open up for residents.
Here's just a couple quick responses I'd like to get from you. What do you think is going to happen with baseball in Nashville?
Well, I would tell you that over the years, just about every year, I would get a call from Major League Baseball, and they would say, "What do you think are the chances for Major League Baseball?" And I would ask them how much funding were they looking for to make it happen, and they would say something like $1.5 billion, and I'd say, "Don't think we're ready yet." But the people that are bringing the major league idea to town now are thinking very differently from that. And so I think the odds of Major League Baseball coming to Nashville at a future date are pretty positive. But there's an awful lot that goes into a decision like that. And so I think it's probably a 5 to 10 year kind of a project.
Uh-huh.
I know that Major League Baseball, the current teams are in recovery mode. They, like so many sports teams, including the Predators. And
Well, let me just say the Red Sox are not really in recovery mode. They're in a championship mode.
well, I confirm your bias. Yeah, I confirm your bias. I'm a little more of a Braves fan, so it's been a good year.
Had a better year.
I have to seek out Rich Riebling because I know he's a Cardinals fan. So, it just this is a good year for Braves. But I do want to say that I think it's in our future. I just think it's going to take a little time, and COVID sort of changed the timeline a little bit.
How important is professional football for Nashville?
Oh, look, every professional sports team we have in Nashville enhances that quality of life. It promotes the brand. I mean, look at what's happening with the Titans right now. Look at what has happened with the Predators. Look at what's happening with the MLS, the Nashville Soccer Club. All of those professional sports teams are projecting Nashville's can-do attitude. It's like a global ad for Nashville. Sometimes I get a little bit anxious about all of the out-of-town visitors that want to come here, enjoy Nashville, and go to a game. But the reality is that professional sports makes us, a big dot on the map. So right. Very important.
We're a big dot on the map too, I think, because of our entertainment about our downtown. I think is one of the more compelling downtowns in the United States, but there's been a lot of controversy, particularly this past summer, council action regarding different forms of transportation downtown that's geared toward tourism, whether it's a party whatever vehicle they're using. How big an issue is that for the city?
It's a big issue. It is. First of all, we want to be known as a safe place. We want to be known as a place where people of all types can come and enjoy the music and enjoy the entertainment and the vitality of downtown. And particularly that Broadway area. And for a lot of people, there is concern about all of those things operating in that environment. I'll often reflect on the fact that as a grandparent, I go out and buy car seats for my grandkids so that they can be safely strapped into my car. And yet, it is of some concern that there are trailers pulling people around, standing up, having alcohol. And to be honest with you, it just feels unsafe. And we've seen incidents occur as a result of it. So I think it's one of those things that you can still have a great time and be safe and be a part of the action. And I think we need to do that. Honestly, Carl, the boom in tourism around Broadway has brought with it some issues that we need to resolve to maintain the comfort and the spirit of the Broadway area.
What, looking forward, 5-10 years, and from your current position and from this current time, what are the top 3 issues confronting our city? I mean, if you're trying to present a vision of the future, what do we need to be working on? What should be our priorities?
Well, education is number one. That's the key to everybody being able to unlock the opportunity that is gathering here. And, we all agree that we are not where we want to be in our pre-K-12 system, in our pre-K-12 work. So we've got to start resolving the issues about providing that excellent education that allows a young person to be ready for opportunity when they graduate from high school, whether that means more education or it means a job. They need to be ready to seize that opportunity. I think the second thing is transportation and access, the ability to be connected, whether it's job, whether it's recreation, whether it's housing, it's all connected. And so,
Phrase,
that say again.
quote a phrase.
Yeah, to quote a phrase. And so that transportation infrastructure is really key. And then to the degree that we can influence affordable housing, we should. I think Metro's general plan and policy to help create affordable housing, especially along the arteries of Nashville, is a good first step, but we need to encourage people who build housing to be thinking about building affordable housing as well. And then the last thing I'll say is childcare. COVID did a number on childcare facilities, and the barrier to entry into childcare is high. A lot of capital investment, a lot of regulatory pressure on childcare to maintain safety for the kids. And somewhere along the way, I think we're going to have to encourage the establishment, maybe incent the establishment of childcare facilities.
Okay. Have I missed anything, Ralph? What else is on your mind? What else do you think we ought to be talking about? We're still Music City. You think the music industry is here to stay and feels comfortable here and happy?
Yes, I think actually the fact that we're Music City and that is such a creative and entrepreneurial business is part of what attracts creative people to Nashville, which is part of what attracts Amazon and Oracle. When a company like Oracle makes a commitment of 8,500 jobs in Nashville, there's another 11,000 jobs that are created in the area just because those 8,500 jobs are created. And one of the great things about Oracle and some of those larger IT-related organizations is that they are a magnet for talent. People want to be a part of them, and they come here, they stay here. Young people aspire to work there. So, I think music is the core of that creative ambiance. Entrepreneurship in Nashville, 24% of our GDP. That's about 6% higher than the national average.
Right.
Music stimulates a lot of that.
Well, you talk a lot about attracting creative people to a city, and that's the key to sort of its vitality. And I think Nashville, whether it's entrepreneurs in healthcare or whether it's music or whether it's universities, that's one of our great strengths. Are we pricing ourselves out of success? Is Nashville become too expensive? Are you worried about the trends in real estate? Are you worried about the cost of living indexes? I mean, how are we doing there?
Well, there's no question affordable housing is a challenge. Even people that are moving here from much more expensive cities. I think 12% of our in-migration is coming from Chicago. There's about 8% of our in-migration coming from each of the two coasts, the East and the West Coast. When they reach here, they can afford housing often that is really good housing. But I often hear that the dollar doesn't buy as much when they get here. And then when you look at young people or people that are at the beginning of a career or re-careering, housing costs are a challenge. And especially when we look at that deep prosperity population, there's a need for proximity to jobs, and the expanded cost of housing close to the jobs is an issue. So yeah, that is something that can keep you up at night. Eventually the marketplace will stabilize and steady, but until then, we have a real challenge with that.
Right. I mean, back when we were working together on these issues, I mean, Nashville had that great strength where the median income in Nashville was higher than the cost of living nationwide, and it's just a sweet spot to be in. And we're not in that spot anymore, but there's different appeals for the city now that we didn't have 10 years ago too. I mean, the city clearly is just booming. Well, thank you.
At the moment, people are willing to sacrifice to be here. But that's a band that the requirement to sacrifice to be here is something you'd like to eliminate, both for people that are already here and the people that are coming here.
Right. But then you add on top of that, I think you can also say that the cost of living in Tennessee and in Nashville in many ways is just lower than most places. I mean, and the business climate, of course, is so friendly that there are a lot of benefits to being in Nashville, despite the fact that it's now a little bit higher cost of living here than it was before.
Look, we are still one of the lowest tax burden cities in the country. So, that alone is a big feature. The state of Tennessee and Nashville are seen as stable areas, stable government, stable finances, stable areas. So, all of those things are a part of the complexion when somebody's thinking about coming here to live or to put their business here. I had breakfast a couple of weeks ago with a company that moved their business here from California. They make capital investment in new businesses. Mm-hmm. When I said, why'd you move here? They said, A, it's a great location. B, you have great education institutions. And C, it just got too hard in California.
Yeah.
So
it's still an attractive place to be. And, but, that's why you got to work at your job. You got a lot of things to keep balls in the air and things to keep an eye on. Pat, do you have any questions?
I do. I've got a couple. We haven't seen any come in from the audience, but I wanted to ask Ralph, hope this doesn't put you on the spot, but if you could highlight one business in Nashville that has invested not only in building their organization, but in contributing to the well-being of the city, who would it be and why? And you could pick more than one if you don't want to put anybody on the spot, but is there anybody who's doing a great job of being a good citizen in Nashville?
That would be a long list. It would be hard to isolate one. But I to comment on that, Patrick, I have to say to you that in the last 5 or 6 years, we have seen new entries into Nashville coming into Nashville with the awareness that they have to make an investment here, that they need to be a part of the leadership, that they need to be engaged. I think one of the great features of Nashville is that when you look at community leadership, these aren't people that hand over checks or delegate to someone else what needs to be done. That community leadership is at the table together doing the actual work. So, as you look at Oracle bringing some of their education resource into the area, as you look at Amazon making contributions to the housing issues, as you look at Alliance Bernstein that really makes big investments in cultural activity, that is an expectation that this community is now projecting, and those new entries to town are fulfilling. Karl had a lot to do with an awful lot of companies coming to town and establishing that trend. So I would tell you the new arrivals understand that, and it's built upon a legacy of the more established companies that were here already saying, HCA, when HCA says you need to be engaged in the community, when Vanderbilt says you have to be engaged in the community, people listen.
Yeah,
Well-
there's an incredible history of corporate responsibility and businesses stepping up and looking at the best interests of the city. And I use this as an example all the time when I talk about Nashville, is that it speaks volumes that the Chamber of Commerce #1 priority has been, since I can remember, but certainly well before I was mayor and all during the time I was mayor and up to the present, has been public education. And they have put their, they've walked the walk, and they continue to work on the issue when it's up and down and hard, and it's, they get it. So, I mean, I think we've been very lucky to have a lot of businesses here in the chamber that care fundamentally about the city and want to invest in the city's future. I mean, certainly championing public transportation is not all pats on the back and,
Ralph, you
I
said
revel in the fact that we tried a couple of times and we think the next time around, we're going to win it.
right.
Ralph, you said some kind things about the World Affairs Council. Thanks for that. I would just like to say in return that the World Affairs Council really is built on the support from Belmont University and from the Nashville Area Chamber of Commerce. Big hat tip to Lori Odom, the VP for International. And the relationship we have with the Chamber is fantastic, as exemplified by the hosting of the ambassador from Japan last week. Let me just ask one last question in that vein. What would you tell businesses about global literacy and the importance of global affairs awareness and the kinds of things that we do at the World Affairs Council to explain to them why we have a World Affairs Council in Nashville?
Look, I would just say that the whole world is a marketplace now, and it's a marketplace for Nashville. And in this time of e-work, there's tremendous resource throughout the globe. And honestly, I would say the World Affairs Council is that institution in Nashville that helps create the awareness of Nashville, the rest of the globe, and the awareness of Nashville by the rest of the globe. I can't emphasize enough the significance of having the Japanese ambassador in Nashville, having a Japanese consulate in Nashville, and frankly, all of the other traffic that we get from the diplomacy staffs of other countries throughout the world. We'd love to have their consulate here, but they wear the path out between Atlanta and Washington, D.C., coming here to be a part of the global enterprise that Nashville has and to promote the global enterprise that Nashville projects out to the world. So World Affairs Council is the center of that. I'm not aware of any other organization in Nashville that has taken that role on. So salute to Belmont, salute to World Affairs Council. we're happy to be partners.
Well, that's great. Carl, unless you have something else, I'll close this out here. We've been speaking with Ralph Schulz, president of the Nashville Area Chamber of Commerce. A very full conversation about what's going on in business around Nashville, and we thank Ralph for being with us once again. And if Carl is off on vacation, we know who to call to be a guest host down the road. That was a great evening. Again, this is a Global Nashville with Karl Dean. We've had a great conversation with Ralph Schulz. Thanks to everybody who's tuned in tonight. And a reminder to take a look at the Tennessee World Affairs Council website at tnwac.org, where you can become a member or make a gift to the council to support our global affairs awareness work. Again, thank you all. Everybody have a good evening. Good night.